Hey everybody, I'm Wesley. I'm happy to be here to talk to you guys. Oh, first I should say, namaskara. Welcome to our session. We're getting close to the end of the day. How are you guys doing so far? You guys learning a lot? Awesome, all right. I have to take a picture because I have to prove to my boss I actually came here and talked to you guys. Otherwise, they're not gonna pay me. Smile, everybody look like you're happy. Awesome. All right, so the first thing I want to tell you guys is this is just a big bait and switch. Quick show of hands. How many of you guys have ever heard of Google Apps Script? Hey, that's actually pretty good. Normally it's like 1 out of 10, 3 out of 10, but this was almost 4 out of 10. All right, so that's great. Well, too bad for the rest of you because that's what today's talk is all about. However, one side effect is that you'll also learn how to extend Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, Forms, and Gmail with add-ons. All right? By the way, we have 30 minutes, and I have 48 slides, so let's go. All right, and by the way, if you guys if you have any extra questions, feel free to drop them in the doc, and otherwise we can talk to you afterwards. All right? So cool. Let's go. So my main goal is to help you become successful using our developer tools and APIs. Okay, some of you guys may know that I'm the host of the G Suite Dev Show on YouTube, so I have videos from time to time, and a lot of the code samples that I'm going to show you today, there actually will be video, so you can actually watch individual video on a specific example that is interesting to you. Okay, and I'm also a contributor to the blog and also the Twitter handle. So anyway, so I look forward to keeping in touch with you guys online, even if I'm not physically here. Okay. So my background is I'm a software engineer. I was one of the original engineers that built Yahoo Mail, if you guys ever heard of that, but many, many years ago. I'm a teacher as well, too, and I'm very happy to be talking to you guys today about AppScript as well as add-ons. Okay, so this is the story. We're going to talk a little bit about AppScript, and I'll show you what kind of things you can do to automate and extend G Suite, and then I'll go more specifically into looking at add-ons, and then I'll talk about various use cases and apps that people have already done. All right, so what is Google Apps Script, and what is it not? Okay, is it another Google secret? We have lots of secrets, right? Well, you know, it's not really our best kept secret, nor is it really a secret at all. But I think it still has relatively low mindshare. That's why I asked you guys a show of hands to see who of you have heard of it before. Okay. So what is Google Apps Script? By the way, here are our original and our new logos. And the new design hints that AppScript is like a Swiss Army knife. It's very utilitarian. It's a tool based on JavaScript. But it's less like using APIs and more like using services or built-in API access. And because of that, you don't have to worry about more mundane things like writing OAuth code. Okay, so to help with this understanding, let's talk a little bit now about what AppScript is not. Okay, it's not something completely different. It's just JavaScript. So there isn't that much new to learn. Even a Python guy like me knows some JavaScript, okay? But it's also not your daddy's JavaScript, meaning it's not client-side, and it doesn't run in the browser necessarily. You're not going to use it for DOM manipulation, nor form validation. Okay, there are some exceptions, of course. But what are you going to do with the browser? Well, the only thing you're going to do with the browser is edit your source code in it. Okay, so that's generally the case with AppScript. Now, if you're familiar with Node, it's like Node because it is server-side. However, you're not running asynchronous event-driven code that execute on Node servers. Instead, your applications are going to run in the same Google data centers that powers Search and YouTube and Gmail and all the other Google services that you guys are used to using. Okay, so your apps will be running on the same machines. In fact, that will give you access to resources that you can't get with a regular Node server, right? Being able to talk to your Google Apps, access the data and things like that. So that's really where the power comes in. Okay? So if someone was to ask you or ask me in one sentence, how can you describe what AppScript is? Well, AppScript is a serverless JavaScript runtime for G Suite automation, extension, and integration. Okay? And then we'll look at examples of each of these so you can see what I mean by that. Okay? What kind of things can you do with AppScript? It could be something very simple like a function in a spreadsheet. Or it could be a complete web app that does lots of different things, many, many lines of code. And, of course, everything in between. All right, now let's look at automating and extending G Suite. So we'll give you some examples, and then we'll talk about add-ons. All right, so for the Google services that you guys see on the screen here, you'll see, yes, there are some Google Apps and G Suite ones, but then there's also ones that are not part of apps or G Suite, right? Like Google Maps and YouTube. They are Google services, but they're not part of G Suite. So this gives you a hint as to the fact that AppScript can do a lot more than just deal with apps and G Suite. Okay, there's plenty more it can do. So for every Google service that you see, each one is a single JavaScript class. All right, so you see I've highlighted a couple of them here. One is for Google Calendar, one is for Google Docs. But in general, whenever you see something with app after it, that generally indicates this is a service. Notice again, it's not like using an API as much. Instead, it's kind of like an object that's already there. So the example from the page in the docs is for Google Slides, all right, where you can open a presentation or you can create a new presentation. So it uses Slides app, all right? So that's how you access Google services. You have sort of like one JavaScript class, and then from that class, you have a whole bunch of methods that you can call to access those particular document types or those services. All right, everybody good so far? All right, good. So what is the list of all the things that you can do with AppScript? Well, all the G Suite and app stuff that you know on the left-hand side, including ones that you probably don't know. All right, but then you can also talk to these other Google services in the middle column. And then finally, we don't want to constrain you, right? Maybe you need to leave Google, right? You need to access services that are available online somewhere else, somewhere in your data center, something that belongs to your company. Or maybe it's a public service, right? So that's why we have URL fetch. So you can send HTTP GET requests as well as POST requests and talk to other apps that are online. You're not restricted to just doing everything from within a G Suite environment or a Google environment. And then similarly, if you want to talk to an external database, you can use the JDBC service. All right, so there's plenty more that you can do. All right, now what kinds of app scripts are there? Well, there's three general types. We have standalone scripts, which are exactly what they sound like. They're just regular code that sits out there and runs and does stuff for you. Then we also have add-ons and document-bound scripts. Okay, the way you get access to those is generally if you're in an editor, you pull down the Tools menu bar, and then there's a selection called Script Editor. And then from there, you'll be able to pull up the code editor for that particular, for apps scripts that you write for that particular document. Okay, and then add-ons, you can get and manage add-ons also from that pull down. And then finally, the last type of app script are the simple web apps and gadgets that run under Google Sites. Okay, so these are the three main types. Of course, in this talk, because you guys are here, we're really focused on add-ons and document-bound scripts. So I'm not going to talk about the other two anymore and just focused on the topic at hand. Okay, so document-bound scripts. Like I said, you open up Google Docs or Sheets, and then you just pull down Tools and then Script Editor. Okay, so document-bound scripts are those that are tied to specific documents, like a doc sheet, slide, or a form. And of course, you're going to have method calls that are unique to those document types. You can only call getActiveCell for a spreadsheet because it doesn't make sense to do that for docs or things like that, right? Same thing goes for create presentation. That only works for slides. You can't create a presentation in spreadsheet and things like that, okay? So those are document-bound. Now, add-ons are a specific type of document-bound script. And then Gmail is a little bit special because Gmail add-ons are not tied to documents, but instead they're tied to individual email threads. Okay? So what are add-ons again? They allow you to extend the existing functionality of G Suite applications or allows you to embed the functionality in your app inside ours, all right? Giving your users that access where, oh gosh, I don't have to exit my editor to go access this app. I don't have to switch browser tabs. I can actually get the functionality from your app directly inside one of Google's editors or Gmail, okay? So the add-ons that we have launched in 2014 for Google Docs, Sheets, and Forms. And then just 9 weeks ago, we released Google Slides add-ons. And then just 5 weeks ago, we released Gmail add-ons. So this is pretty new stuff. So I'm going to have like more examples for the last two just because of the latest hotness. All right, but I'm also going to show you some examples of the other types too, just so you can see the variety of things that you can do. Okay? All right, so let's say you're new to AppScript. I'm happy that many of you guys raise your hands, but let's get everybody else up to speed. Okay, so when you create a brand new AppScript project, you get this little panel that you see here that gives you some predefined code, some boilerplate code in case you're writing those specific types of add-ons. If not, just choose blank project. That's what I usually pick because I just want a blank slate and I just want to start something from scratch. Okay, so that's the first experience that you have. And then once you get past this, then you get dropped into the editor. And so your first Hello World application will look something like this. Okay, so I'm in a spreadsheet. I pull down Tools, Script Editor, blank project, and then I'm going to type in this one-line JavaScript function, okay, which I split up into 4 lines so you can actually see each piece one at a time. All right, but I have a generic function. It connects to the spreadsheet. And what are the commands I want it to do? I want it to get the current active sheet that I'm on as if I was sitting in front of the user interface and looking at that spreadsheet in my computer. I want to access what is in cell A1 in the upper left-hand corner, and then what do I want to do with that cell? I want to set the value of that cell to Hello World. Okay, so once you save this and run it, notice there's no authorization code. However, when you run the script, guess what? Your users still have to give permission to your apps to be able to access their spreadsheet because it's their personal data, right? So they still have to go through the authorization process. But you didn't have to write any OAuth code because that part is built in already. Okay, so that's one of the useful things about using AppScript is that it's more user-friendly or developer-friendly. If you were to use our REST APIs, you would actually have to write OAuth code to manage, getting of an access token in order to be able to access user data. Okay, so this is definitely one of the benefits for developers is that they don't have to worry about the OAuth. And then once the user clicks allow, giving permission for your code to access their spreadsheet, then you're going to expect that that text is going to show up in the spreadsheet. Okay, it's almost like magic. When it happens the very first time, it'll make you smile. All right, and that's the best part about it is that you feel that you've gotten something done, and now your mind is going to wonder as to, well, if I can do this, think of all the other things that I could build with it, right? It's really, really exciting. All right, so if you want to, review this simple hello world, of course, I have a video. It's what I do for a living. I don't have a private life anymore. Okay, so I'm here to make you guys successful. So that's my job. All right, now let's look at this one. What can we do with this? That's an address, right? Happens to be the address of the Google New York office, but maybe you want to invite your friend here for lunch. What can you do with it? Well, we know we can talk to a spreadsheet, but remember, the universe is pretty big from within Google. I can talk to other Google services too, right? So for example, I could say, hey, you know what? I'm going to talk to that spreadsheet again, the current active sheet that I'm on. And this time I want to look at cell A2, which we can see is the actual address, right? So what do we want to do with A2? Well, we're going to get its value, save that address, and then I could say, hey, Google Maps, can you create me a brand new map and put a pin on that address? Cool, right? And then furthermore, maybe you want your friend to come to lunch here, at the Google office, right? So I can then say, hey, Gmail, can you send a link to this map to my friends so that they know where to come for lunch? Okay? And that's it. You've got a 4-line JavaScript application, 4 lines, but it touches 3 different Google products: Spreadsheets, Google Sheets, Google Maps, and Gmail, right? I mean, it's not exactly a mission-critical app, right? But it does show you that you can use multiple Google services simultaneously to write tools that are somewhat useful or could be very useful, okay? And of course, there's a video in case you want to review this too. But once you can do something like this, where can you take this? Well, guess what? Maybe you're a salesperson. Maybe you have to visit all of your customers in the New York area. All right, well, guess what? I don't have to have just 1 address. I could have 4 addresses for all my customers. Then I can kind of plan out where, which way I want to go. And then guess what? I have access to Google Maps driving directions too. So if I have to drive, or if I have to bike or walk, I can get that stuff programmatically as well too. And maybe you have a monthly book club. Maybe it meets at a different location every month. Maybe you want to tell everybody, hey, this month we're meeting at this location. Okay, or maybe I have a user group that meets once a month in a different location, right? So you can kind of like imagine what kind of things you can build with just a little bit more code than the example that I showed you guys. Okay. In fact, one of the other things that you can do is maybe you can ask your membership, so who's coming, right? Maybe you have a Google form, and then as soon as they submit the form, maybe then they're coming, and then you can email them the link to the map of the location. Because why bother mailing all 400 people when you only know that 200 are coming, right? You don't want to spam everybody, so that's like another use case, another way to extend this particular type of application. Okay? All right. Let's say I have a bunch of images. For brevity's sake, let's just pretend they're all online, but they could also be somewhere else. You could have a zip file of images. You could have a Google Drive folder full of images. Okay, but for this example, let's just pretend I've got these 4 images that are online, and I want to build a slide deck with these images. Okay, so you can do that using the slide service that we just launched 9 weeks ago. All right, so taking each one of these images and then building an individual slide for each one. So you can actually see that in the presentation that it's been created based on the images that you see on the left-hand side. So how do we do something like this? How complicated is this code? Okay, it's not that complicated. In fact, I would say this is only about 6-7 lines of code. If you don't count the data, because I have a whole list of the images and the URLs, but if you don't consider those lines of code, well, we really only have our main body has 4 lines of code here, all right? And I'm just going to walk you through each line really quickly right now so you can get an idea of what it does. But everybody knows that when you guys create a new Google slide deck, you get the title page, right? It's got a title and a subtitle. So the whole purpose of the first 3 lines of code is to fill in the name of the presentation, which comes in the name variable, and then this subtitle down here, which is Google Apps Script Slide Service Demo. So all the first 3 lines do is fill in the title and the subtitle on the title slide. Okay, it's the same thing as you see here. There's the title, there's a subtitle. All the other ones are added. Okay, so once we have that, then we have a for loop, all right, that loops through all of the images in the array, all right, and for every image, it calls the add image slide function, and all that does is adds a blank slide and inserts that image into that slide. And that's it. Now you have a slideshow. Okay? And not too many lines of code. And of course, there's a video. Okay, so that's one example. Now, so what we've seen so far are document-bound scripts. We had the hello world, we had the maps and the Gmail example. Right? Those are tied to a Google Sheet. They are document-bound to a Google Sheet. And then we just looked at the creating of a slideshow. That's tied to a Google Slides presentation. Now, how do we convert those document-bound scripts into add-ons, right? Because that's really the whole purpose of this talk, right? So, and why would you convert something to an add-on? One of the main reasons is it's really hard to share that code, all right? You'd have to cut and paste it or somehow copy the document. That's really not distributable, right? If you turn things into an add-on and put it into the G Suite Marketplace or the Chrome Web Store, then other users can find your app and install it, perhaps for their entire companies, okay? So you can actually make a living writing software to help companies be more efficient, all right? And so one of the things that you have to do to convert a bound script to an add-on are a couple of things. One is what happens when this document is opened, all right? So you have to add an on-open. What happens when this add-on is installed? You need an on-install. Generally, it just calls on-open. All right? And then, if you want to further modify the user interface, okay, you can do that. You can add a sidebar so that your users can see your app on the right-hand side within the same document, or the same spreadsheet, or the same form. Okay? So those are the key things that you would need to implement on top of the existing code. So everything else on the bottom there is whatever we had before. So all the code I showed you before, the hello world, the Gmail and the Google Maps example, and then creating of slides, those things are part of the document bound script. All you would do is add these things, okay? And then the other thing that you need to really be careful about is you need to really understand the authorization lifecycle. And the reason for this is because companies may be installing your code, right? So it would make people nervous if all of a sudden when they open their document, there's this weird add-on that was added to their, to their document, right? So there's a slightly more complex authorization lifecycle that you need to understand, because what happens is when that add-on first runs, it doesn't have full permission to do everything. Okay, you have to wait for the user to sort of like opt in to be using this particular add-on. Okay, just because it's installed doesn't mean that it's been enabled for usage. So if you are going to be creating lots of add-ons, just learn the life cycle well so you understand what things your script can and cannot do and at which times. All right, so that's pretty important to know. But once you get past that, then you'll have an add-on, and you can upload it to the G Suite Marketplace or the Chrome Web Store, and people can find it. You make a logo, you make a description, entice your users. Why should people install your add-on? Why is it useful? You have to keep those things in mind. So even though you're developers, part of your brain has to sometimes think, what do I do marketing-wise? How do I get people interested in my add-on? And to encourage them to install it, and how can I make their lives easier? Okay, so that's really the main thing. Now, let's talk about Gmail add-ons now, because Gmail add-ons are a little bit different. So let's say that your company sent you here for work, okay? Maybe you booked an airline reservation, maybe you have a hotel reservation, and then maybe you're catching Ola taxis every day, or Uber or whatnot, okay? So we all know that these email receipts are coming into our Gmail because we see them as they happen, right? And if we're going to have to create an expense report and get reimbursed by our companies, it's kind of a burden to have to look through all my receipts, copy down the information, go to my separate expense reporting app, fill in all that information, and then submit it to get reimbursed, right? Can't we just do the same thing without leaving Gmail? Can't I just process my expenses at the same time I'm looking at the receipt? And can't I do it on the web and mobile without having to write two separate apps for this, right? So those are the key questions that drove the product team to creating Gmail add-ons for everyone, okay? So I'm happy to say that we can actually do this now. So you can actually make this little form show up right in your Gmail. In fact, I just hid it so that you didn't see it before. But this is exactly what it would look like if you were on your computer and you actually brought up this particular add-on that my summer intern wrote this summer, or this past summer, where it could read the contents out of your email message, specifically the receipt, right? It can pull out the date of the transaction, the amount of the transaction, and a description. All you really need to provide is a spreadsheet URL, and when you click submit, okay? Oh, by the way, it would be great if I could do it on mobile too, so I don't have to wait to get back to the office. I can actually do it while I'm sitting in the cab, all right? So that's the one cool thing about Gmail add-ons, is that once you write it, it will work on the web, and it'll work in mobile, and you don't have to write any other version, right? Just one piece of source code. So this is the exact same receipt, but on an Android device, okay? So anyway, so once we have this and we click submit, we get the, my form has been successfully submitted, and then when you go to that spreadsheet, well, now you have one place that you can just leave it up and just do your expense report straight out from here, okay? So that's really the main reason behind this. So the code is going to be a little bit larger because Gmail provides you the ability to add your own user interface. So for us, we had that little form, right? So it takes a little bit to create the user interface and then build the code that runs behind it. Okay, so here's just one kind of quick view of building the expenses form. All right, you can see all the source code, of course, in the video, and we've also made this example available on GitHub, so you can download the entire app and study it and implement it and change it and all that kind of stuff. So everything's available for you. It's also available as the code lab. All right, so if you really want to learn how to do Gmail add-ons, you can build this example line by line, well, maybe not line by line, but chunk by chunk. Okay, so you can actually build this app for yourself, and then you can take this as motivation to building your own Gmail add-ons. Okay, so that's called Expense It. All right, now let's talk about in general. Now that I've shown you guys the technology, what have other companies done before you? What are some of the other use cases for AppScript as well as for add-ons? Okay, so categories, something like these 6. You know, having business workflows, controlling resources, automating things that normally take a lot of effort to do as a human, building dashboards and other reporting for managers, integrating with other third-party tools, you know, because, you know, for G Suite, we can't provide everything for you. You know, we have a document editor, we have a spreadsheet, we have presentations, but we don't have a CRM, we don't have, you know, payroll and HR apps, we don't have that kind of functionality. So these are the kind of things that you can bring in to your G Suite environment by using these, you know, third-party integrations. And then you can also, you know, if you are a G Suite or a Google Apps domain administrator, you can actually use this tool to automate a lot of stuff. Like, for example, if next week you have 100 new employees, you really don't want to be creating each of their Gmail accounts one at a time. That'll drive you crazy. I mean, it's good job security, but you're probably going to be burnt out pretty soon. Okay? So those are the kind of things that you can do with AppScript. All right? Teachers really, believe it or not, they like to write teacher tools to help automate instructing students. So for example, there's a well-known app called Flubaroo, and what that is if a teacher creates an exam, you know, using Google Forms, and all the students submit the answers into a spreadsheet, well, guess what? The teacher can submit their own answer, which is the answer key, right? And then the Flubaroo tool can actually grade everybody else, all the students' results based on the teacher's answer key. All right? So tools like that are very, very useful. Okay? And then automation, like mail merge, right? There's so many different types of mail merges, like form letters in Google Docs. You have your email addresses in Google Sheets, and then you want to send these through Gmail. All 3 of these are possible, right? They're 3 different Google products, but they're all supported by AppScript. So automation is a big one. Enterprise workflow. So for my team, everybody is going on vacation at a different time, right? And so what happens is everybody has their own out of office in their calendars, but then we have an AppScript code that builds a team vacation calendar so that if you want to see who's in the office, you can actually take a look at this one calendar and it tells you when everybody is out of town. So that's a very useful thing too, right? All right, and then of course you can just go to the G Suite Marketplace and look at all the different apps that are available for you. And you can see how many users they have, right? I mean, your app can actually go viral if companies install it. So that's another motivation as to why you guys should consider writing add-ons. And then, you know, a big company like Lucidchart, they have a very famous web app. But you know what? They integrated that app as an add-on for slides because maybe I want to have these diagrams incorporated into my slide decks. So they built an add-on specifically for this purpose. It's pretty awesome, okay? All right, now what else do you need to know? You may have heard about AppMaker. So if you don't code at all right, AppMaker is a tool that you can drag and drop web components or UI components like a text box, a dialog window, and it automatically generates AppScript code underneath the covers. And so if you know AppScript, you can modify and customize your AppMaker apps. So that's pretty powerful, okay? So anyway, so keep that in mind. You know, it's a little bit outside the scope of this talk, but overall, what I hope to impress on you this last half hour is that AppScript and add-ons are just JavaScript. It gives you access to existing Google services and other online resources. It's not like an API, so you don't have to worry about like authentication and things like that. It's more like built-in services. It's serverless. You don't have to set up VMs or anything like that. It runs in Google data centers for you. And there's lots of different use cases. You can extend G Suite with add-ons, or you can integrate your app's functionality, and then you can further customize AppMaker applications. And hopefully, after today, it's no longer our secret, all right? Because you guys all know about it now. Okay? If you want support, we have Stack Overflow, we have a Google Plus community, we have the issue tracker. Other things that you can do, we have a code lab. So come join me tomorrow. I'll show you a slide in a moment. We can do a code lab together tomorrow. There's a whole bunch of videos, some docs, and if you want to, you can also use our REST APIs. And then, like I said, come join me tomorrow. I'm doing a hands-on training. One is AppScript, the other is actually using our REST APIs. I'm also going to be talking about the Sheets API later on in the afternoon. And if you're a Python person, I'm speaking at the Bangalore Python Users Group on Sunday. So hope to see you guys more later this week. Thank you very much.